and you've got to make something for it, and you would never have practiced doing it, and it'll be difficult for you. So just always work to a stone. Like buy some CZs or anything really cheap. You don't have to have anything expensive. Just work to a stone. So I've got these kind of, that one's got a scratch on it. I've got these black sapphires, well, very, very dark blue sapphires. They're like 5mm. That's a nicer one. Yeah, so I'll be making a ring for these, and a lot of the rings I saw on Etsy are a wedding ring and a really tall, flat-sided rub over setting, like plonked on top, like not even set down onto the shank. It's not very strong, it's ugly. I think it's just not very nice piece of jewellery. So I'll show you how I would do that same idea. So this strip of metal is just a bit I found in my scrap box. It's like leftovers from an old melt up or something I did in the past. Yeah, about 1.5 square, and I'm gonna put that through my rolling mills and make it D-section. It's a little bit thinner than I would have chosen, but it's close enough, and it's sort of ready-made piece of metal, so fine, I'll use it. And my microphones get caught up on the handles, it's difficult. Let's give it a bit more. Not totally crushing it, just putting a rounded edge on one side. There you go, that'll do. So what have I got now? I've got 1.6 wide, and it's gone down to 1.3, 1.29-ish deep. That'll do. I'm going to anneal that now and turn it up into a ring. And what size you're going to make your ring is an opportunity to gain a little bit of extra skill, because it's not much harder, but it takes a little bit more thought and care to end up with a ring an exact size rather than just turning one up and whatever. So I'm choosing size K for mine, quite small. Because this shank is so thin, I was going to do a technique which I wouldn't normally recommend, but it's so thin. Just wrap it around a smaller size, maybe 4 or 5 sizes smaller, 3 sizes smaller than where you want it to end up, and then just push it up your ring stick to where it wants to go. And then you can just mark it and you know where to cut through, and then that's a quick, easy way to get the correct size. What's nice with making wedding rings, like this one's just a touch too big after I've soldered it up and made it round. So you can just go to your ring compressor, just touch it down. I didn't do nothing. Yeah, you can just squash it down a tiny bit. Obviously you can't, if you do this, I recommend filing off, if your solder joint's a little bit lumpy on the outside, file that off, because that could affect how round it goes when you push it down. There you go, that was good, just a tiny bit. And then ideally don't go too far, because if you've got to start stretching it up, and then the solder joint gets a bit of pressure put on it and stress, and it might crack. And then when you cut through it and made it nice and flat again for soldering, your size might be too small even more, and then you've got forced to sort of try and stretch it up again, and then it might break again, and then you go into a land of things being ballsed up. So this is my ring, it's a filed up stage. If you got yours to this stage, make sure it's perfectly round. Check it from the side, is it all like straight or is it all a bit twisted? If you compressed it down in that compression cone, it does a good job of making things very flat and perfect. So I wouldn't worry too much, but certainly have a look and get it all papered up. You know, have to polish it, but make sure it's papered up on the inside, and then after papering to quite a fine grade, it should sit at the correct size. If it's all filed up in the correct size, that means once you've papered it and polished it, it's going to be too big. So get it correct now and get it all papered up ready for the collet to put on, which we will get on with right now. Okay, alright, what I've done with this bit of metal, I flattened it and then measuring the depth of my stone, because obviously I want to cover the depth plus have a bit extra for that edge to set over the top and without that point sticking into the finger. Yeah, so make sure I've got a bit more than I need, not a huge amount, and then I want it, just the design I have in mind, I want the outside of that slightly curved, so I've put it through my widest D D shape on the rolling mills. So it just starts me off having that curve on the outside. There's nothing wrong with having it flat. I've literally made one. I got one in my box at the moment for sending off for casting. That's completely flat on the sides. There's nothing wrong with that at all. But just for this one, because I've got that one I saw on Etsy in mind for my inspiration, this one's D'd on the outside. Okay, on with this. Get my stone, hold it in my tweezers. Don't have to be special stone tweezers, just any old tweezers will do, as long as they've got relatively decent flat ends on them. Just double checking it, holding it down, making sure I've got enough depth of my metal for a setting edge and the stone not sticking out the bottom. This is probably just about right. I've got quite a lot to play with there. But bear in mind, once you've turned it up into a collet as well, you're going to be filing the top and the bottom away, so you need a bit spare. Get it annealed, help you out, and then helps the metal be well behaved and not stressed out and start cracking. To start off, I've got quite a tight curve on that, just for that 5mm stone, so I'm going to use these pliers, which are like half round snipe and then half flat. A bit of metal, pliers, get it right on the end, not too close or it'll slip off. Make sure your metal's kind of straight. Mine's not perfect straight, but straight enough. I'll give it a bit more, and obviously just turn it. I'm only working with silver. It's relatively soft, especially after annealing, so I should be able to turn it quite easy. And then also one thing to consider, they're quite a severe cone shape there, so that's not ideal when you're trying to make a straight collet. So sometimes I just turn it over, make sure I'm putting it kind of in the same position. Thinking about the curvature, roundness of that stone for what I'm turning up. Maybe preferable to go a bit too big. And then before I get to, rather than just turning that up into a circle, you end up with a kind of, doesn't really work because it kind of gets in its own way when you're trying to finish that circle, and you've got to have that curve on it. It can't just be half curve and then half flat, just touched up to it. It doesn't really work. Ideally you want to make a circle. So just start from the other end a little bit before you get to it. Let's just get that curve going. Do as much as you can in your fingers, I would anyway. Obviously when it gets to the end it gets a bit hard. You can use your peg to pull it down, it gets a bit painful. Pushing hard onto the end of a bit of metal like that. Well, I can feel that's because this bit of metal is a melt up, it's toughened up really quick. So I'm gonna, at this stage, I'm gonna anneal that again and then continue with it. Okay, so that's annealed, and I think it's important with these videos to be as helpful as possible to people. I want to show you like everything I do, because otherwise, if I just say like and turn up a collet and then edit to a finished collet, you'll be like, hang on, how did you turn it up? How did you hold it? What tools did you use? So I'll show you exactly what I did. So I was using these pliers to turn it up that much. Now I just pick up a bit of blue tack, stick a stone on it, so I can hold that right over the top so I can see what I need to do. Excuse me. That curve needs opening up and then the whole thing's squashing up closed. So I'll literally do that just by clamping it wider on a wider section of that little cone bit. There you go. Oh my god. Right, and then just these pliers, just goes down. It's quite easy to see what you need to do exactly because it's just got to be a circle. So I'm just making a circle that fits. Alright, now I've really got to close it up. Alright, I'll just hold the end with these. Give it a turn as far as I can. Hold this over the top. Okay, so now that I'm gonna chop off that rough horrible bit right close to the edge, and then close up a bit more, check it again with a stone, see how much I need, then I'll cut that off, turn it up to a complete circle, and then just keep measuring it against the stone, making adjustments, and then getting it finished. So I'll just chop that off now. Hold it in your fingers, parallel pliers if you want, just whatever. Okay, let's curl up this end a bit more. Two pairs of parallels. I mentioned these in my golden nuggets video. I think I did anyway. I use two pairs of parallels. I find them really useful for just doing things exactly like what I just did. Okay, let's check out the stone again. Alrighty, so I'm going to cut off around about that much, and then it should close up to about the right size I want. And if not, I'll show you what to do to make it perfect size. If you've only got a tiny bit of bending left to do, but the metal's gone rock hard, I would say don't battle on and really try and force it. Just stop and anneal it again. Like if you're working for me, I would rather see you just annealing metal all the time rather than working and stressing the metal out. Because also when metal's really hard, tools are more likely to kind of slip off, and then, you know, if that slips off, it kind of gouges that corner, kind of gouges off the edge, and you can ruin things. So just stop and anneal things all the time. Especially working in platinum. Like most of the work I've done for the past like 12 years or however long I was at that company, all in platinum. So platinum really needs annealing to work on a lot. Especially when you're doing, like, pulling it through the mills, pulling down wire, just anneal it all the time. Right, so I've closed it up now. I'm going to cut through it, get the flat edges to sit really perfectly together. And I think mine will be a little bit big, possibly the correct size, maybe a little bit big, but I'm going to show you what I would do in that situation, because it's certainly preferable to have it a bit too big than a bit too small. And when you get to the final stages of joining it up, basically just squash it together, put the saw cut through it, squash it together, put the saw cut through it. Now that join, from what I've seen online, people will call that good enough to solder together. That is nowhere near good enough to solder together. Like I've mentioned 100 times before, and I will continue to do so as long as I'm running this channel. Tightness of joins is so important. You've got to have them really perfectly flat. I see that, I just see a massive gap. That's touching at the bottom, and then the top is just opening up. It's like a big V hole. So I'll be putting a saw blade through that again, and then getting that to close up perfectly before soldering. And the trick is getting it to have that perfect join and be the correct size, because obviously you don't want to keep adjusting the join, adjusting the join, adjusting the join, and then you've made it too small. You kind of ballsed it up. Also, if it's not perfectly round at this stage, don't worry about it. Get a good join, get it soldered up, and then we're gonna knock it round. But as long as it's kind of round, doesn't have to be perfect. Right, so I've got my collet ready for soldering up now. The stone could be set on there at that size, but it's a bit too big, which I'm going to leave on purpose so I can show you how you can squash them down a little bit once they're made. Oh my god. Righty, how are you getting on? I just soldered mine up. Now I've got this like mini ring stick, which is a little bit of a strange tool to have, I know, and I appreciate you may not have one. It's one of those things where you don't need one, but if you've got one, sometimes it comes in really handy and you're glad you had it. But I'm assuming you don't have one of these, so let's not use it. What I did was filed my solder joint nice and flat around the outside, and what am I going to do now? I'm going to get this, put it in a collet punch. It's a far more normal tool to have. Right, so obviously just find one where it sits down in it. I'm not punching it out because I've got, my size is I think a touch too big, so I'm just going to bang it down into one. Because I'd rather it shrinks rather than it gets pushed outwards. Give it a whack. I've done a lot of this today. Just been making little wheels for a mini car I'm doing, which is here. Little Lambo. Right, anyway, check stone again. Right, this stage is where you can affect the outcome, the the look of the setting because how wide it is around the outside of the stone. I like rub-over settings when it's quite thin. If you can do it really neatly, I think that looks quite nice rather than a big chunky fat setting edge, which can be an advantage if you're trying to fake the size of a stone and make it look bigger. This is what I would say is about medium. It's not too fat. I'm gonna bang it down a little bit more so when it's set, that setting edge is a bit thinner. I mean, you do have, because the outside of this is slightly barrel shaped, you know, it's D-section. There's an element of control after it's set. I can file it, fake it up a little bit to make it look thinner. I'm just going to like reduce the size of this a little bit more, and then I think that will do. Right, you've been giving it a whack with a hammer, so pick your stone up again with your tweezers. Dropping everything today. Yeah, pick a stone up, check it along the side. Make sure you've got enough space to set in, and where the finger size in shape is going to be cut out the bottom. So you just need a little bit of space above and below the stone. So mine's just about alright. So now it's just if you're happy with your little collet, it's just a case of cleaning it up. And the way I'm going to do that is not with this. Notice how my fingers are not all cut up and black like most jewellers' fingers are. That's because cutting yourself with a saw and burning yourself is not a virtue. It's not like a tattoo that you're a jeweller to show the world. Just look after yourself. Just because you cut yourself doesn't mean you work harder than someone who doesn't cut themselves. So I'm going around the top and bottom now. Again, I'm working kind of flat really. I'm not worrying about putting that dome on. Not at this stage. I'm going to very lightly buff it flat. Have a look at the sides. There's always one that you think is better as a top than the other. This is going to be my top. Right, now let's put this in the ring. Alright, now let's put this collet in the ring. There's two ways I can think of that come to mind straight away. You can cut a section out of the ring and then drop that down, or you can cut a section out of the collet and drop it down. That's more tricky and more difficult to do neatly, but where it's kind of nice, you can literally leave that ring complete inside, which might be advisable on something if you were... I mean, I'm just doing this in silver because it's kind of my scrap metal I use for making YouTube videos. But if your finished ring was planning to be silver, silver's not that strong. So if you've got quite a fine band like this, it might be nice to cut the section out of your collet and lower it down onto the band, and then you get to keep that bit of band going across the centre, so your ring is really strong. And then obviously just cut away what you need to for the stone to drop down, but it would be quite nice to have that bar going across the middle. But just as that's more tricky, a bit more advanced, again inspired by the things I've seen on Etsy, we're going to cut a section out of the shank, and hopefully it's not too tricky to line up to get the collet sitting against the shank nice and snug for a good neat solder. So let's try that, see what happens. First of all, find your solder join in your ring. Ring is the correct size, yeah, so don't worry about having the join at the back. Hopefully you don't need to adjust it. So let's cut out the solder join, and then we'll drop this down. Alright, again, I nearly just stormed ahead there and started doing it, but I may as well just show you like everything I'm doing. So I put a little nick, found the solder join, yeah, I put a little nick with my saw blade in, just make sure I get cut out the right side. Alright, so the solder join is this side. I just hold the collet on top, make sure it's lined up properly. I'll just put a little line there. It doesn't have to be too accurate, but obviously you don't want to cut out too much, because if I cut out too much it means I've got to close the ring up a little bit and then the size is wrong. So cut out not enough, and then we're going to phrase it back to get the perfect size. Okay, so just to explain something, as your ring, yeah, solder join was here, cut here and here, which is less than I need for the collet. Okay, just make that clear. And then other things I need to explain. that ring, when you cut through it, cut like this, because rub over collet we made is kind of barrel shaped, yeah, it's like that. So this has to match up here. So you need that extra bit of metal on the bottom half, because we're going to be scooping that out to get it to fit the bottom of a barrel shaped. So I hope this is making sense. This is our shank, it needs to be this shape. So that's why you cut it at that angle, to give yourself space for that to happen. And then lowered down. It's going to be like that. All adjustments are made to the ring. Be very, very careful with it. Like obviously you don't want it bending out of position or twisting, just try and keep it like that. So be very careful when you're making the adjustments to that. So when you get really close to it, it might be tempting to kind of pull it out a little bit and get that to fit in, but then you're changing the size, the finger size, so you can't do that. So you just have to always cut it back to get this to fit, rather than start bending it about. It's quite important. If you watched my Golden Nuggets of Wisdom video, which I uploaded a few days ago, I mentioned these little stone cut discs, and where these are useful at this moment, I could, oh my god, I just put a nick in my shank. Oh my god, I can't talk and do jewellery at the same time. Right, where this is useful, I can't, like a file, to hold that and then file it backwards and forwards, you're at risk of yanking the shank out of position. But this cuts quite well while being very gentle. There's no weight really, it's just grinding the metal away without really pulling it. Obviously files and burrs have got teeth, they dig in, there's quite a lot of force against the metal. This is just quite smoothly just wearing it away. I'm using one of these like diamond coated grinder frazers. God, I wish I knew the names of things. One of these things. They're cheap, buy them. That was like 10, 15, 12 quid, I don't know. Say £15 for all those, and they last forever. Buy some. They're sometimes nice, like I say, like if I had a proper cylinder phrase, like that, with the teeth on, it can be a bit overly grabby. You can get that runaround thing, it can catch and go, and then ruin it. And on something delicate like that thin bit of silver, if that catches, it's going to bend out of position. So these are a little bit safer. You can make them even safer again by putting a bit of like beeswax or just lube on there, and it should slip quite nicely whilst still cutting. Well fast as well compared to trying to file it out neatly. Now with the file, obviously we're going straight across, but this is round, it's not flat, so I need to take a little bit out. Got the distance right, I'm going to take a little bit out the centre of it with a larger cylinder grinder thing. Right, hope you can see that. I'm going to take out, it needs a little bit more adjustment because I'd like it to fit a bit better before soldering. I want it to drop down a touch more. And I think that's a bit gappy as well. But basically, see, that's in there from what I've done, so you can do the same, get it to fit. I'm just going to take out that bottom half of that curve. I'm just going to get that curve to sit a little bit lower, and then that should be good to solder in. So there you go, that's what mine looks like. Just cut that scoopy out, and then just clicks in there. Right. More things to mention before you put them together. Get both sides to line up perfect. Make sure it sits in there like perfectly flat, perfectly straight. Ring's nice and round, not stretching it out or anything. Because you can't, when you solder it in, you've got to have it lined up perfectly before you make your first solder. It's no good having it tilted because one side fits really nice and then you think you can push it down, because then you're just going to change the curvature of that shank. It's got to drop down straight, sit in there perfectly. Do one solder, by all means sort of cool it down and then have a check, make sure you like how the shank is lining up and everything, and then do the other one. But you certainly can't put one side in and then have the other side nearly correct and then start cutting it through with a saw and stuff. That's not a good way to make jewellery, because you're kind of going what I call sort of working backwards and forwards. You just only work forwards. So get that correct for that. Drops down, get it correct position, solder 1, solder 2, it's done. Not solder 1, adjust it. Like solder 2, oh, it's wrong, cut through it, adjust it, solder it up, oh, the other side looks wonky, oh, the shank's twisted. Like, you're going backwards and forwards. Just get it right at this stage. So get that correct for that. Get it sitting in straight. Check it's double check, triple check it straight from this side, from this angle. Hold it this way. Make sure that was all correct, you know. Just get it correct before you do any soldering at all. So when it's in there, just checking it at all angles. I'm not trying to find an angle I like, I'm trying to find angles I don't like. And when there are no angles you don't like, that means it's correct. Sorry, more things to say before you solder it in. If you are having trouble getting it to stay in position, if you've got a big pair of tweezers, just hold them in like that. But if you're working in silver, be very careful, because when silver gets hot, it just goes so soft, like completely like butter. So there's a chance if your tweezers are putting too much pressure on it, soldering it, it's going to anneal and get very soft, and it's just going to squash out of shape. And then that's really big trouble, because you've spent ages looking after the shank, making sure it doesn't move, and then it's just completely moved. That's difficult to get that perfectly round again as well, lined up as nice as it is now. So maybe don't use your tweezers for holding it straight. There you go, this is how we're doing it. Sorry about the focus there. Coming back, focus coming back. Yeah, that's how we're doing it. I've just got the tweezers in the split in my peg, and then I'll just balance it in position. And it's quite handy like this. I can look around it, adjust it easily with my fingers, get up, look down on it, go down, look across it, get my head this side, look across that way, just check everything is straight. I soldered it up, and I went out for lunch, and then I come back and I just cracked on with it. So I'm sorry you missed out a little bit of what I've been doing, but basically I've got my collet in there. But basically, yeah, I've got my collet in there and made sure it's lined up nicely with a half round ring file. Did the inside. When you're filing yours out, make sure your highest point of your curve is directly in the center, not filing more one side than the other, and then the ring can be perfectly round again. Yeah, and then I just picked up, where is it, my rubber wheel. I like these, you can sharpen them to a little blade, and then I'm just touching down across my solder joints just to get them nice and sharp again. And then it's kind of finished. No, it's not, and then we're going to clean out the inside. So let me just continue my rubber wheeling, just need to do a little bit more, and then I'll show you what I do to clean out the inside of the collet. What will make the difference between your ring and other handmade rings, bring the quality up, a little bit of attention to detail, a little bit of extra work you're giving yourself, but you're increasing the quality. So find a ball phrase about the same size. I mean, that one's just the first one I grabbed. It fits a little bit loose. That'll be alright. If you've got one that's a bit tight, it's like perfect. You can scoop it out down there really neatly. And I would advise maybe starting from the back to really make sure it comes out. This back hole is really central to the outside of your collet. So yeah, with a ball phrase, get it in there nice and neat and really clean it up and make sure it's perfectly circular top and bottom. Especially the bottom, because that's just the hole that people are going to see. Done with the ball phrase, I've got this worn out old paper in Whizzer. Just getting it all nice. I mean, with silver, I wouldn't bother, but if you've got gold or platinum, it's nice if you've got those little pendant bristle brushes. Get it all polished in there, and it'll make the stone look its best as well when it's set. The mini paper Whizzer. Just gonna go over it, see if there's anything, any little lumps or anything I don't like. Because before the stone's in there, it's an opportunity to do any extra soldering if you need to. It's alright. So that is ready for setting now. So there you go, ready for setting, ready for polishing. That's the finished ring, and it's a bit nicer than the one I saw at Etsy. The one at Etsy had completely flat side. It was really high for the size stone that's set in there, and it was literally just like on the top. It was like, do I have anything? I mean, this one's got the straight side. It was like, imagine just that collet, just like on top like that, with like a big sharp edge hanging over the edge. Not very nice, and then didn't look very nicely made. And I had a round stone in there, and that setting edge was all wobbly and rough. It looked just a really rough looking thing, and they were asking 4.5 grand, so I was a bit shocked by that. So for that same ring, this is how I would make it. I'd have the collet set into the shank, go right down to the finger, just filing that finger shape out of it so the ring's perfectly circular again on the inside. And I made it with control, like the right size for my stone. I even chose how thick the setting edge is going to be either side of the stone, and it's neat and strong and it's ready to go. Now I may go ahead and set this, get it all polished, just so I can take a photo of it for the YouTube thumbnail. But et voila, that's what I would do. So there you go guys, another instructional video. I'm not sure if this was a strange video or not. I literally just was looking at my phone in the morning and I was like, ah, and then ended up making this ring. I don't know what to say. It's just, if you want to make that kind of ring, that's how I would do it. There's so many options. You could have straight sides. You could even have, if you wanted something just on the top, you could even make literally just like the set-in bezel edge. That'd be quite nice, just kind of on top rather than one that's deep and goes right down the side. And then you could cut out the shank. Would it work? I'm not sure. And my children are shouting at me from the window, home from school. Right, yeah, you could just have that on top if it's just like a little set-in edge. It might be quite a nice little sweet design, or straight side with a daylight hole. There's a lot of options to do it, but just, I think the trick is for it to be nice is just to make it well and have everything straight and nicely set, soldered well together, and everything's neat and all the solder joins are all nice and sharp. Another thing I didn't mention while I was putting it in, the solder joint of your collet, line it up with the shank, and that way, like now at this stage when it's about to be polished, I don't have to worry about any solder lines showing up on the sides because it will be right there on the shank. Thanks for watching. Click like and subscribe and share, the notification bell, just all the buttons on the screens, push them all, and see you next time for more instructional how to make jewellery videos. See ya.